Usually for these series-long reviews, I like to tackle the All-Stars movie after the main series, since that is the first thing that's released in the cinemas. But for this season, I'm gonna make a special exception.
At the end of my review for the main series, I gave it a fairly high recommendation, but was still able to point out several severe flaws. And while this film doesn't address all of them, it does address some of the major ones, and in fact fixes a big one regarding Miyuki. Yes, this is another pink lead cure focused feature, but it is one of the better ones in my opinion for that very reason.
Plus, apparently Toei really likes taking down my movie reviews, so hell of it, I'm gonna cover something I really like before it all gets taken down. With that in mind, let's take a look at Smile Precure's movie outing, A Big Mismatch, a picture book.
Our movie opens with...
And fast forward. Darn, I don't have any more double A's.
On the bright side, no pun intended, this film has one of the shorter and least pandering miracle light scenes ever, so it makes this little tutorial feel like less of a prophecy of doom. Speaking of which, I do like some of the advice they provide.
Teaching the developing otaku not to swing around their glow sticks at a Vocaloid concert is important. Seriously, those things can be dangerous weapons.
The feature presentation finally begins with a flashback to a young, still very shy Miyuki living in the city, likely putting this before the flashback from episode 44.
I bring this all up because episode 44 will be a big talking point for this movie.
One day, she stumbled upon a picture book being given away at her local library. And it also happened to be one of them newfangled self-reading books, as it just opened up on its own to a page of the main character who occasionally switched expressions. Yep, nothing suspicious here. Just give it to this guy. I'm sure he'll take good care of it. Anyway, the reason the library was just giving it away for free was because the last few pages of it had been ripped out. In spite of this, young Miyuki still thoroughly enjoyed the book and its main character. She was a young girl who brought smiles to everyone around her through her own. Sound familiar? Inspired by this kind-hearted protagonist, Miyuki promised that she would complete her story for her.
Well, ain't that nice. Say Miyuki, while you're at it, do you think you can touch up this book too?
Cut to the present, and the Precure were out and about at a local book festival. It was basically a big picture book convention where attendees could participate in activities or meet their favorite authors and their creepy-ass mascots. Seriously, who thought making a kid-friendly version of Congo was a good idea? For our heroines, they enjoyed stuff like the parades. Funny, I thought your one true husbando was Peter Pan, Miyuki. Enjoying some afternoon tea, in spite of again some terrifying mascots. Yeah, Yayoi, Candy, and Miyuki have the right idea. And since Let's Go Smile Precure was playing, they also acted out scenes from their OP, just like what they did throughout the main series. Yeah, points to this show for getting the most mileage out of their fun little opening, even in the saddest of moments. However, throughout this happy little sequence, a stray Boldemon was bouncing around.
How much you want to bet he's just running away from the filming of Digimon Tri? I'll stop making fun of those movies when they get around to answering all 1001 of their dangling plot lines.
Eventually, the Precure stumbled upon a tent where they were playing a movie that just so happened to include a special guest star.
I wouldn't really bother. It's probably one of those crappy post-production conversion jobs.
Besides, the movie they ended up seeing had some real 3D to it. As if these reviews didn't have enough Pokemon references to them. But yeah, this girl's name was Nico, and she was being chased by a pair of roly-poly dudes. As it turns out, they were in fact the gold and silver horn kings from Journey to the West.
It's sad to admit that these two are actually better representations of those characters. At least they don't look like Thunderbolt Fantasy rejects.
The Precure made quick work of them by turning their own weapon against them. This is what happens when you buy your weapons from the Acme Corporation. But yeah, if it wasn't obvious already, this girl was the picture book protagonist from the prologue, even carrying around her own book. However, Miyuki had completely forgotten about it after several years since seeing it last. Though personally, I think a lot of that blame should also go to all of the blunt force trauma to her head. Still, Nico wanted to reward them for their good deeds.
Hey, she is voiced by Lena Inverse. Would you really be that surprised? And I bet most of my younger viewers don't get that reference. Oh god, I'm 30.
Anyway, she was actually transporting them to the world of picture books through a very colorful, slightly seizure-inducing sequence. To be fair, it was better than the alternative.
Imagination.
Also, they did clarify that this place is different from Marching Land, as this world had actual embodiments of the famous fairy tale characters, not unlike...
Imagination.
Yeah, that. In fact, the Precure themselves could even take part in those stories, which caught Miyuki's ear, and okay, we're not even 20 minutes into this movie, and it's already gone over its nightmare fuel limit. Anyway, each of the girls participated in their favorite stories.
You mean that St. Tell you ended up retconning to hell and back?
However, Miyuki choosing Cinderella over her story clearly had a negative effect on Nico, as had been seen earlier in the film too. Thus, when she sent each of the Precure off to their storybook adventures, a dark bird-like shadow took form behind her.
Wow, never knew Tokoyami had such a cute little sister.
While Miyuki pretty much did a repeat of episode 40, but less cross-dressing, each of her friends went with some more Asian classics. Yayoi chose Journey to the West, knowing full well that the toy animators could trace the original Dragon Ball opening to their heart's content since, you know, they owned it and everything. Akane played out Isunboshi again. And Rika now channeled their inner Den-O and went for Momotaro and Urashima Taro respectively. However, Nico decided to throw a wrench into everyone's fun.
Momotaro.
Because of course, everything has to be a shared cinematic universe these days.
Sure enough, after passing by Kintaro, Reika ran into a rather obese Urashima Taro. He had tried to play out his fairy tale scenario, but...
Man,
even our fairy tales have become needlessly political.
Now encountered the protagonist of Journey to the West, minus Tanzanzan.
Yeah, I totally relate. I'm still trying to roll for that loot bunk.
Yayoi ended up running into Isunboshi and his miracle mallet.
What, an old boss fight with Shinryu Maru? What jip?
And the shrunken Akane encountered a giantess Cinderella.
I'm starting to think that half of the script is just made up of the screenwriter's fetishes.
But yeah, this is all the doing of Nico, who even threw in some Paper Mario for good measure.
Keep waiting on the Attack on Titan music. It ain't coming.
Trying to get away from their shadowy storybook icons, the Precure all ended up converging in one area. Cornered, things look grim for our heroines. Yep, they were rescued by the antagonists of 3 of the stories, who had gotten tired of waiting for their respective protagonists to show up. FY, the Ox King is hands down my favorite character in this movie. He is a badass who, for the sake of preserving proper narrative flow, rallied his fellow antagonists together to work alongside the Precure to take back their stories. He even got right down to the point and tried to get answers from the fairy tale protagonists.
A
villain who wants every story to have no ending? Does he want everything to just have a Gainax ending? Oh my god, I just realized, the villain of this movie, it's Hideaki Anno!
Now, as awesome a twist as that would be, Nico comes out and reveals her motivations for all of this. As it turns out, Miyuki never did get around to finishing Nico's story, and as a result, Nico came to resent her old friend, even teaming with a literal devil from her story. Now, for those who have seen my reviews, this plot might sound familiar, but I think it was much more well thought out. We'll get more into it at the end. For now though, the Ox King and his buddies help the Precure make a tactical retreat by throwing them like footballs.
Anyone else besides me want to see a Suicide Squad anime featuring this guy and Wolfrune?
After being given a breather, Miyuki revealed a little bit more about her past with Nico, and later in the movie would reveal that she was in fact the inspiration for her current self.
Now, this has led to some confusion in the fandom, as episode 44 established that Miyuki got a smile from her imaginary friend, whom I took to referring to as Diana in the review.
Now of course, this could always be a case of the left not knowing what the right hand was doing, if it weren't for the fact that both this movie and episode 44 were written by Shoji Yonemura.
And while Yonemura hasn't always been the most consistent writer, I do see a line of events that allow all of this to make sense, so hear me out.
First of all, 44's flashback likely played out just as Miyuki described, but before that, she found Nico's book and was unable to complete it due to her lack of creativity and art skills. And when her parents decided they were going to live at her grandmother's for a little while, somehow during the move, Nico's book got lost in the shuffle. It's an understandable situation. We've all misplaced our stuff during a move, especially when we were kids. What wasn't quite as acceptable, especially for Nico, was the fact that Miyuki completely forgot about her. Sure, thoughts about her probably still occupied the back of Miyuki's head, but those thoughts were soon replaced by Diana. Yeah, Miyuki's so-called idealized self, that was probably based off of Nico.
Now, this was something I was looking for with Miyuki in the main series, a significant character flaw.
Not just a surface level flaw like her clumsiness, but one that tackles her very ideology. Miyuki's goal in life is to spread happiness to everyone around her, and yet, as admirable as that is, she is at the end of the day only capable of so much. She can't solve everyone's problems, and yet her need to satisfy everyone urges her to make promises she's simply incapable of following up on.
Now granted, this is a trope that's used a lot in superhero media. I think Clark uses a bit too much, but at the same time, it is a conundrum that many superheroes will have to face at one point or another. How many acts of valor can they, or really should they, commit to?
This will become a very significant theme in the next season, but for now, Miyuki had to face the consequences of her own failures. Though luckily for her, she had some good teammates to help pick herself up. And hey, as a bonus, we even got a little development from both Nao and Akane in this scene as they pointed out their leader's good points. Again, these two really could have worked if they had just given them a few more duet episodes. Thus, the final battle with Nico and the Demon King was on. As the rest of her team held off the evil fairy tale characters, Miyuki made her way towards Nico. Said forgotten friend tried to turn Miyuki's teammates against her, but...
うちみゆき好きやもんからちょっとぐらいボロボロになっても
Again, blame Nafumi Sasaki for not coming up with badass lines like that.
With her friends backing her, Miyuki was able to relay how much Nico had influenced her and how sorry she was for forgetting about her for so long. The two started to rekindle their friendship, but a certain birdie wasn't interested in redemption arcs.
笑顔のない憎しみだけが続く終わりのない世界を作り上げるのだ
How much you want to bet that this guy is just really butthurt over the ending to Teen Titans? Look buddy, there's probably going to be a season 6, so just calm down.
But yeah, unsurprisingly, the Demon King took over as main villain, having absorbed the power of Nico's hatred towards Miyuki over the past several years. He's able to easily overwhelm the Precure, so to help them, the Ox King tries to release Nico in spite of her objections.
そんな泣きそうな顔して何言ってやがる助けてほしいなら素直にそう言え
Have I mentioned yet how much I love this little beefcake?
The Demon King did catch on to them, but Miyuki was able to defend them. This ended up further provoking Nico into helping Miyuki, and as a result, the ripped pages of her book began to reform. With the king distracted by all this, the Precure were able to start mounting a counterattack, finally breaking out the clock and the wands. However, since this is an enemy who has the ability to negate endings, he of course also had the ability to cancel out their usual finisher. With that, the Demon King started to go full blue seed on the world of the fairy tales, but luckily, Momishi Fujimiya was still around to deal with this and...
And there I go making 90s anime references again. Hello, is this the number for new class recruits?
Nico tried to stop the Demon King by saying that she wasn't going to provide him with any more hatred, as she had realized how frivolous hating Miyuki for all this time really was. The king doesn't take what's basically a breakup all that well. And hey, since they've already borrowed from their opening, I wonder if they're going to use something else from Dragon Ball. Of course. With that, the king was about to launch one last giant attack, and hey, look, it's about Deus Ex Light time again, isn't it? Though again, it's thankfully short, and it could be said that the main component of this power-up came from Nico's words.
笑顔で包む愛の光 ウルトラキュアハッピー
Thank God this movie came out a year before the Rebellion story. Otherwise, a scene between a pink and a purple magical girl would have been kind of uncomfortable.
With that, and a second press of the royal clock, the Precure were able to purify the Demon King of all of his hatred, reverting him back to Boldemon. Thus, the movie began to wrap up with Nico truly befriending her former captor, as well as work beginning on finishing, shall we say, the picture book adaptation of this film. Oh yeah, and there was also some stuff after the credits, but again, let's just get the kids out of the theater before they insist on dancing along.
This is by far one of my favorite Precure solo movies, if not my overall favorite. It has good action, great performances, and just adds so much to an already good series.
As I mentioned, some have accused this as just being a ripoff of the Fresh Precure movie, and while there were some similarities like The Forgotten Friend, I think this was a much better take on it, as this was a far more personal tale. This was a story tracing back to the origins of Miyuki's current persona, and how it might have been created not through the most amiable of means. Good intentions or not, Miyuki did end up giving Nico false hopes through her promise. Granted, she did make a promise with a book that she couldn't have known was sentient, but the point still stands. In her early years, Miyuki was irresponsible with her developing heroism. Love didn't have a hand in the creation of Toimaji, but this whole conflict? Yeah, definitely Miyuki's fault. And if she truly wanted to earn the title of a Precure, she had to be prepared to live up to seemingly even the most minute of commitments. And that's probably the biggest takeaway from this film. We all have commitments we must fulfill. So it was appropriate that the villains of this movie were the no-ending faction. The idea of a third faction with a motif that fits the themes of the series is a great one in my opinion, and preferable over completely unrelated antagonists or the forgotten fourth general who's just a palette swap of the final boss. But yeah, the no-ending faction fit perfectly in Smile Precure's world as an extra antagonistic force. After all, it could be argued that no ending is far worse than a bad ending, as at the very least with a bad ending you can generate some sort of emotion. Sure, often it'll be a negative emotion, but many tragedies were written in a way so that the viewers could grow and learn from them. Nico, as a result, became a dark reflection of what Miyuki could have become if she had allowed herself to drown in nothing but self-pity. She wanted everyone to share in the suffering that comes from inescapable stagnation. The character herself was great, again thanks to a very strong performance by a super veteran voice actress. Seriously, how is Hayashibara still able to sound like Nuku Nuku after 20 years? But yeah, Nico makes for a great sympathetic antagonist, as her motivations are understandable, but ultimately self-defeating as she herself came to realize. For similar reasons, the Demon King was a decent villain. Sure, he didn't get nearly as much development as Nico, but that little bit at the end when he went berserk did at the very least add a layer of last-minute depth to him. It's very likely he held just as much resentment towards Miyuki as Nico for not finishing their tale. Thus, in spite of being opposing forces in their story, Nico and the king found common ground. And when Nico seemingly ended their relationship, that was probably the final straw for him. As a result, it does at least put him above some of the other one-note movie villains. Definitely no Baron Salamander, but put these two together and they make for a great short-lived villain faction. Other standouts of course include the bovine I was gushing over throughout this review, the Ox King. In general, I really like the concept of the enemy mind, where hero and villain work together to fight a common enemy, and sometimes end up realizing they're not that much different. I especially liked how Ox King and his fellow antagonists were clearly content in their villain roles, just as long as they had something worthwhile to do, making them all the more admirable. Again, stuff like this is what I wish would have been the resolution to the bad end generals. Heck, considering how Ox King kind of reminded me of Wolfrude, and there were two Oni, one of them green, it makes me wonder if these guys were based off of the original ending for the bad end generals before producers mandated a more stereotypically happy ending for them. Now, this is just my own conspiracy theory, so take it with a grain of salt, but come on, you can't tell me you wouldn't want to hear Wolfrude say stuff like this. The last thing to cover is of course our main heroines. Now, the best kind of Precure movies are the ones that can bring each of the characters' personalities to the forefront within the allotted time for a cinematic release, which this movie more than accomplished thanks to all of the storybook vignettes. From Yayoi showing off her otakudom by cosplaying as the most overused storybook character in anime, to Reika and her traditional upbringing and desire to maintain a morally straightforward compass, now in her fun big sister tendencies, and Akane showing off her determination to overcome the odds. Again, points to this movie for giving the two less popular characters some of their long overdue screen time. And of course, there was the character who probably benefited the most from this film, Miyuki. While she was always a likable and very entertaining pink lead here, for me at least, she was also a protagonist who was just a little hard to connect with, as she was a little too infallible with her morals.
To me, there's nothing worse than a superhero team led by someone who's never called on their poor choices or outright selfish behavior, and I've already drawn enough from that well, so let's just move on.
So it was refreshing to see someone actually be able to challenge Miyuki's morality. On top of that, we got to learn why Miyuki treasures smiles above all else. Intent to book or not, it's clear that the story of Nico left a significant impression on a young Miyuki. And, much like how Precure have and will continue to influence its young viewers with their tales, it's nice to know that these heroines also had their own inspirations. Based on a line early into the film and the fact that the royal clock's hand didn't turn during the climax, this movie seems to take place in between episodes 44 and 45 of the main series. However, to me, this movie feels like a more proper conclusion to Miyuki and her arc. Keep smiling as much as you want, Cure Happy, whether it be legitimately cute or that.
Next time, it's back to the crossover films as the all-star movies enter into a new stage. And they don't start off on the strongest of foots. And now I regret using up all my Age of Ultron jokes for the Lux 2. Is there any other kind of crossover thing I could reference? Hopefully something that won't take away my revenue.